The town of Dustwater sat like a dying animal on the edge of nowhere. Its wooden buildings bleached gray by the relentless sun and scoured raw by winds that carried more dust than hope. The main street stretched barely 300 yards, lined with false front shops that leaned against each other like drunks after closing time. Even the tumbleweeds seemed reluctant to pass through, as if the very air carried the stench of dreams gone sour. Sheriff Amos Creed sat slumped in a chair outside his office, boots propped on the hitching post, hat pulled low over eyes that had seen too much. The badge on his chest caught the afternoon light, tarnished and scratched, much like the man who wore it. His beard, once meticulously trimmed during his army days, now grew wild and streaked with gray. The smell of whiskey clung to him like a second skin, seeping from his pores along with the sweat that never quite dried in this godforsaken heat. Time was. Folks looked at Amos with respect, even admiration. He'd been a captain in the war, led men through hell and brought most of them back. But that was before the nightmares, before the bottle became his closest companion, before he realized that surviving a war didn't mean you knew how to live in peace. "Sheriff's drunk again," muttered Jeb Turner, the blacksmith, as he passed by with a load of horseshoes. His apprentice, a boy no more than 15, peered at Amos with a mixture of curiosity and disappointment. "That ain't no sheriff," Jeb continued, loud enough for Amos to hear if he'd been sober enough to care. "That's just a ghost wearing a badge." Amos didn't stir. He'd heard worse. Hell, he'd thought worse about himself. The war had ended near 20 years ago, but for him, it played out every night behind his eyelids. The screams, the smoke, the weight of command decisions that sent good men to their deaths. The bottle dulled it some, made the edges less sharp, though it never quite went away. The sound of wagon wheels and horses' hooves drew his bleary attention. Not many strangers came through Dustwater anymore. The silver mine had played out 5 years back, taking with it most folks' reasons for staying. Those who remained were either too poor to leave or too broken to try. The wagon was modest, painted black and pulled by a single horse that looked road-weary but well-tended. The driver was a woman, which itself was unusual. She wore mourning clothes, the black dress severe against her pale skin, and a veil that obscured her features. But it was the way she held herself, spine straight despite what must have been hours on the road, that made Amos crack open one eye fully. Clara Whitlow had rehearsed this moment 100 times on the journey from Missouri. Arrive quiet, draw no attention, find a place to disappear. But as she guided her horse down Dustwater's main street, she felt the weight of eyes upon her. A woman alone, dressed in widow's weeds, was bound to draw notice in a place starved for gossip. She'd chosen Dustwater precisely because it was nowhere, a place forgotten by progress and prosperity, where a woman might lose herself and her secrets in the general misery. The land agent in Tucson had mentioned an empty house near the cemetery, fitting, she'd thought, for someone already half dead inside. At Murdoch's general store, she stopped to inquire about supplies. The proprietor, a thin man with nervous hands, could barely meet her eyes. "The old Garrett place, you say?" He licked his lips, glancing around as if someone might overhear. "Yes, ma'am, it's available. Been empty since, well, since the cholera took the Garretts 2 summers past. You planning on staying long?" "As long as necessary," Clara replied, her voice carefully neutral. She'd learned to give nothing away, to speak in tones that revealed neither origin nor emotion. "Traveling alone, are you?" The question dripped with implications. "My husband passed." The lie came easily now. Well, half lie, Samuel was dead. Sure enough, just not in any way she cared to explain to this ferrety little man. She paid for her supplies, flour, salt, coffee, the basics of survival, and loaded them into her wagon. The sun was diving toward the horizon, painting the sky the color of old blood. She needed to find the house before dark. The saloon doors burst open as she passed, disgorging a group of cowboys who'd started their drinking early. They stumbled into the street, blocking her path. Well, drawled one, a thick-set man with small, mean eyes. "What have we here? A pretty little widow come to brighten up our dusty old town? Please step aside." Clara kept her voice steady, hands tight on the reins. "Now that ain't friendly," another chimed in, reaching for her horse's bridle. "We're just trying to welcome you proper-like." The fear that crawled up Clara's spine was familiar, almost comfortable. She'd felt it before, in other towns, with other men who thought a woman alone was fair game. Her hand moved slowly toward the derringer hidden in the folds of her skirt. "I believe the lady asked you to move." The voice came from behind the cowboys, rough with whiskey but carrying an edge of authority that made them turn. Sheriff Amos Creed had hauled himself to his feet, swaying slightly but holding his ground. His hand rested on the butt of his Colt, casual-like, but the message was clear. "Aw, Sheriff, we didn't mean nothing." The thick-set cowboy protested. "Just being neighborly. Jake, your idea of neighborly would make a rattlesnake blush." Amos moved forward, his gait unsteady but purposeful. "Now clear off before I remember there's a law against bothering decent folk." Jake's face darkened, but something in Amos's eyes, maybe a remnant of the soldier he'd been, made him step back. "Come on, boys. Whiskey's getting warm." They retreated to the saloon, grumbling and casting dark looks over their shoulders. Clara watched them go, then turned to study her unlikely protector. Up close, she could see past the whiskey and neglect to the man underneath. Strong bones, hands that had known work and weapons, eyes that might have been kind before they'd seen too much. "Thank you, Sheriff," she said quietly. He touched his hat brim, a gesture probably automatic from better days. "Ma'am, you'd best be getting where you're going. This town ain't always friendly to strangers, especially come nightfall." The Garrett place, near the cemetery, something shifted in his expression. "You picked a lonely spot to make a home. Loneliness and I are well acquainted." It was more than she'd meant to say. Their eyes met and held, and in that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, of one damaged soul to another. Clara felt it like a physical touch, unsettling and oddly warming at once. Amos felt it too, cutting through his whiskey haze like cold water. When was the last time he'd really looked at someone, seen them as more than shapes moving through his peripheral vision? This woman with her tragic eyes and straight spine made him want to stand straighter, to be better than the wreck he'd become. "I'll walk you there," he heard himself say. "Make sure you get settled safe." "That's not necessary. Maybe not." He retrieved his horse from the hitching post, movements deliberate against the drink. "But I'm going anyway." They made an odd procession through the dying light, the widow in her black dress and the drunk sheriff trying to ride straight. Neither spoke, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the quiet of two people who'd learned that words often said too much or not enough. The Garrett house squatted on a rise overlooking the cemetery, its windows dark as empty eye sockets. The front door hung slightly ajar, creaking in the evening breeze. Clara surveyed her new home without expression, though Amos caught the slight slump of her shoulders. "I'll help you unload," he offered, dismounting with less grace than he'd hoped. "You've done enough, Sheriff. Thank you." But he was already lifting boxes from her wagon, carrying them to the porch with movements that remembered strength. Clara watched him work, noting the way his hands shook slightly when he thought she wasn't looking. The careful way he placed each box as if proving to himself he could still be useful. When they finished, purple shadows stretched long across the ground. Amos stood awkwardly, unsure why he was reluctant to leave. This woman was trouble. He could feel it in his bones. The kind of trouble that came with secrets and sorrow and a past that didn't match the simple story of widowhood. "Sheriff," Clara said softly. "Amos Creed, isn't it? I heard someone say your name." He nodded, surprised she'd bothered to remember. "Thank you," she continued. "It's been a long time since anyone stood up for me without wanting something in return. Just doing my job, ma'am." "No," her voice carried quiet certainty. "You were doing what was right. There's a difference. As he rode back toward town, Amos felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the faintest stirring of purpose, behind him. Clara stood in the doorway of her new home, watching his retreating figure until darkness swallowed him whole. She touched the derringer still hidden in her skirt. Then the letter tucked against her corset, the one that could destroy powerful men if they knew she had it. She'd come to Dustwater to hide, to disappear. But looking at the sheriff's broad back disappearing into the night, she wondered if fate had other plans. In his eyes, beneath the whiskey and despair, she'd glimpsed something that called to her own broken places. Understanding. Maybe. Or recognition of a kindred spirit walking the edge between salvation and damnation. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and possibilities. Clara stepped inside her empty house, closing the door on the past even as she suspected it would find her anyway. It always did. But for the first time in months, the thought didn't fill her with only dread. That drunk sheriff with his tarnished badge and unexpected chivalry had reminded her that even in the deadest places, something might still grow. Dawn came hard to Dustwater, like everything else. The sun didn't rise so much as assault the horizon, driving away the night's small mercy of coolness. Amos woke on the floor of his office, cheek pressed against rough boards, mouth tasting of grave dirt and regret. His first conscious thought was of her, the widow's eyes that seemed to see past his whiskey-soaked worthlessness to something he'd thought long dead. He hauled himself upright, joints protesting, and stumbled to the wash basin. The face in the mirror's fragment was a stranger's. Hollow cheeks, bloodshot eyes, lines carved deep by sun and sorrow. When had he gotten so old? Time was. Women had called him handsome. That seemed like another man's life now. Someone who died in Virginia mud and just hadn't had the sense to stop breathing. "Pull yourself together, you sorry bastard," he muttered, splashing tepid water on his face. But even as he tried to shake off the thought, he found himself wondering what Clara Whitlow was doing this morning. If she'd slept in that empty house, if she'd been afraid. At Murdoch's General Store, Clara selected her purchases with careful economy. Salt pork, cornmeal, dried beans, food that would keep, that could stretch. She'd learned to make $1 last, to quiet the growling of an empty stomach with smaller portions and water-thinned soup. The other customers gave her wide berth, whispering behind raised hands. Heard she buried her husband not 2 months past. "Mrs." Eliza Thornberry hissed to her companion, loud enough to carry. "What kind of woman travels alone so soon after? Mark my words, there's something unnatural about her." Clara kept her eyes on the goods, fingers steady as she counted out coins. Let them talk. Words were just noise compared to what she'd endured. But when she turned to leave, she found her path blocked by a tall man in an expensive suit, his smile sharp as broken glass. "Mrs. Whitlow, I believe." His voice carried the smooth confidence of money and position. "I'm Elijah Treadwell. My father owns the bank, among other interests. I like to personally welcome new residents to Dustwater." His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl, lingering on the morning dress that couldn't quite hide her figure. Clara had met his type before, men who thought their wealth entitled them to whatever caught their fancy. "Mr. Treadwell." She kept her tone neutral, polite but distant. "Please call me Eli. We're not formal here in Dustwater." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his pomade and something else, something that reminded her of Samuel in his worst moods. "A woman alone needs friends in a place like this. Protection. I'd be happy to look after you." "That's kind, but unnecessary. Good day." She tried to step around him, but his hand shot out, gripping her elbow. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to send a clear message. Now. No need to be unfriendly. I'm only trying to. I believe the lady said good day." Amos stood in the doorway, looking marginally more presentable than the night before. He'd attempted to tame his beard, and his shirt was almost clean. But it was his eyes that drew Clara's attention, clearer than yesterday, focused with intent. Eli's smile never wavered, but his grip on Clara's arm loosened. "Sheriff Creed, I didn't hear you come in. Probably because you walk so quiet these days, what with spending most of your time horizontal. Yet, here I am, vertical and noticing you've got your hands on Mrs. Whitlow without her say-so." Amos moved into the store with deceptive casualness. That's the kind of thing makes a lawman curious. Just being neighborly. Eli released Clara's arm, straightening his cuffs. "Though I'm surprised you'd notice anything through your whiskey haze. Funny thing about whiskey, it don't make a man blind, just choosy about what's worth seeing." Amos positioned himself between Clara and Eli. "And I'm seeing clear enough right now." The two men stared at each other, tension crackling between them like heat lightning. Other customers pressed against the walls, torn between fleeing and watching the drama unfold. Finally, Eli chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "Well then, I'll leave you to your shopping, Mrs. Whitlow. My offer stands. Dustwater can be dangerous for those without proper friends." His gaze flicked to Amos. "Deputies and sheriffs don't last long here when they forget their place." After he left, Clara found herself trembling, though whether from fear or anger, she couldn't say. Amos watched her gather her purchases, noting the white knuckles, the careful breaths. "You all right?" "Yes, thank you. Again." She paused at the door. "Though I'm starting to wonder if you follow all newcomers around town." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Only the ones that look like they're carrying trouble heavier than their luggage." "And what makes you think I'm carrying anything?" "Ma'am, I've been wearing this badge long enough to know when someone's running from something. Question is whether it's gonna follow you here." Clara studied him, this broken lawman who kept appearing when she needed help. There was danger in his knowing, but also something else, a kinship she hadn't expected to find. "If it does," she said quietly, "I'll handle it. I've had practice." She left before he could respond, but Amos stood there long after, wondering what kind of practice she meant. That night, he limited himself to 2 drinks instead of the usual bottle. He told himself it was coincidence, nothing to do with wanting a clearer head come morning, nothing to do with her at all. Sleep came fitfully, bringing dreams of smoke and gunfire mixed with something new. A woman's face half hidden by a veil, eyes that promised secrets worth keeping. He woke to find his deputy, Tom Morrison, shaking his shoulder. "Sheriff, something you need to see." At the Whitlow place, they found signs of intrusion. The back door jimmied open, drawers pulled out, mattress slashed. Clara stood in the wreckage of her bedroom, still in her nightdress, with a shawl clutched around her shoulders. "They didn't take anything," she said, voice steady despite the scene. "Just searched, thoroughly." Amos examined the damage with growing unease. This wasn't random vandalism or theft. Someone had been looking for something specific, methodically checking every possible hiding place. Any idea what they were after? Clara's hesitation lasted a heartbeat too long. "No, I can't imagine." Tom snorted. "Come on, lady. Nobody tears a place apart like this without—" "That's enough, Tom." Amos's voice carried an edge of command he hadn't used in years. "Why don't you check around outside, see if they left any tracks?" After Tom left, grumbling, Amos turned back to Clara. She'd moved to the window, arms wrapped tight around herself. The morning light caught the auburn in her dark hair, turned her skin to alabaster. Beautiful, he thought, then pushed the notion away. He had no business thinking such things. "You want to tell me what's really going on?" "I told you, I don't—" "Mrs. Whitlow. Clara." Her name felt strange on his tongue, intimate. "Somebody's looking for something they think you have. That makes you a target. I can't protect you if I don't know what I'm protecting you from." She turned then, and he saw fear crack through her composure like fault lines in stone. "You can't protect me either way. These aren't the kind of men who care about badges or laws. Try me." Maybe it was exhaustion, or the patient steadiness in his voice, or simply the need to tell someone. Clara moved to the overturned dresser, knelt, and pried up a loose floorboard. From the space beneath, She withdrew an oilskin packet. My husband was a clerk for a freight company. He discovered his employer was smuggling guns to both sides during the range wars, making fortune off bloodshed. When he threatened to go to the authorities, she trailed off, fingers tight on the packet. This is his proof. Names, dates, transactions, including those of several prominent men who'd rather see me dead than risk exposure. Amos felt the weight of her confession settle on his shoulders. He'd wanted to know, and now he did. The widow wasn't running from grief, but from men who killed to keep their secrets. Why didn't you take it to the law where you were? Her laugh was bitter as alkali water. Because the law there was bought and paid for. My husband learned that too late. She looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. I've been running for 2 months. Sheriff, I'm tired. I thought maybe here, in the middle of nowhere. You thought you could disappear. Yes, he should have walked away. Should have told her to keep running, that Dustwater had troubles enough without importing more. Instead, he found himself reaching for the packet. Let me see. Their fingers brushed as she handed it over, and that simple touch sent an unexpected jolt through him. Amos opened the oilskin carefully, scanning the papers within. His whistle was low, appreciative. Your husband was thorough. This implicates half the territory's power structure, which is why they killed him. Why they'll kill me if they find me. Eli Treadwell's name is in here. Clara's head snapped up. What? Right here, 3 shipments of Spencer repeaters, diverted through Treadwell freight lines. He looked at her gravely. If Eli's involved, you picked the wrong town to hide in. She sank onto the ruined mattress, suddenly looking younger than her years. I didn't know. God help me, I just wanted somewhere to rest. The urge to comfort her was overwhelming. Amos fought it, keeping his distance even as something in his chest tightened at her distress. He was a drunk, a failure. He had no business offering comfort to anyone. Pack what you need, he heard himself say. You're not staying here tonight. Where? There's a room behind my office. It's not much, but it's got a good lock and I'll be right outside. He folded the papers carefully, handed them back. We'll figure out what to do come morning. Why are you helping me? The question was soft, wondering. You don't know me. I've brought nothing but trouble. Amos considered his answer. Why was he helping her? Because she needed it. Because those eyes of hers made him remember what it felt like to be useful. Or because something about Clara Whitlow called to the man he used to be, before the war and whiskey drowned him. Maybe I'm tired of watching the wrong people win, he said finally. Maybe I figure it's time I did my job instead of just wearing the badge. She stood, moved close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used. Be careful. Amos Creed. Heroes have short lives in places like this. Good thing I ain't no hero, then just a drunk with a badge and bad timing. But as he helped her gather her things, as he walked her back to town with one hand near his gun and eyes scanning for trouble, Amos felt something shift inside him. Not redemption, he was too far gone for that, but purpose, maybe, a reason to stay sober one more day. Behind them, hidden in the cemetery's shadow, a man watched and made notes. Come nightfall, Eli Treadwell would know exactly where the widow was hiding and what she carried. The game was just beginning, and in Dustwater, games usually ended in blood. The room behind Amos's office was sparse but clean, a narrow bed, washstand, and single chair. Clara set her carpetbag down, trying not to think about how the walls seemed to close in after the open space of the garret house. Through the thin door, she could hear Amos moving about, the scrape of his chair, the clink of glass that made her wonder if he was reaching for the bottle. There's a lock on the inside, he'd told her. Use it. I'll be out here if you need anything. Now, sitting on the edge of the hard bed, Clara finally allowed herself to feel the fear she'd been holding at bay. They'd found her, somehow. Despite all her careful planning, they'd tracked her to this forgotten corner of the territory. The slashed mattress, the torn-apart room. It was a message. We know you have it. We're coming. She pressed her hand against the packet hidden in her bodice. Samuel had died for these papers. She'd been a fool to think she could outrun their reach. But what choice did she have? The law back home was bought. The federal marshals seemed more interested in Indian raids than corruption. And now she'd involved a broken-down sheriff who couldn't even save himself, let alone her. Sleep came fitfully, bringing dreams of Samuel's face as they'd brought him home. So pale, so still, the bullet hole in his chest like a third eye staring accusingly. She woke to the sound of voices in the outer office, low and urgent. Saw her come in here last night. Someone was saying, "The whole town's talking. You keeping that woman in your office ain't proper, Sheriff." "Since when do you care about proper, Jake?" Amos's voice, rougher than usual but steady. "Seems to me you and your boys weren't too concerned with propriety yesterday. That's different. We were just having some fun. But this, people are asking questions. Mr. Treadwell in particular wants to know why you're harboring a woman who might be wanted by the law. She's not wanted by anyone except folks who can't mind their own business. Now get out before I remember you're drunk and disorderly most Saturday nights." Clara waited until the footsteps faded before emerging. Amos sat at his desk, coffee cup in hand instead of a whiskey glass. He looked up as she entered, and she saw the weariness etched deep in his features. "Morning," he said simply. "There's coffee if you want it. Probably tastes like tar, but it's hot." She poured herself a cup, noting his slight smile when she didn't grimace at the first sip. They sat in companionable silence until he finally spoke. "I've been thinking, those papers, we need to get them to someone who can act on them. A federal judge, maybe, or they're all dead." The words hung between them like smoke. Amos set down his cup carefully. "What do you mean?" "Judge Harlan in St. Louis, found dead in his study. Heart attack, they said. Marshal Brennan, killed by outlaws on the trail to Denver. Commissioner Dalton, drowned in the Missouri during a perfectly calm crossing." Clara's voice was flat, emotionless. Every name Samuel mentioned, every person he thought might help, dead within weeks of his murder. All accidents, of course, all perfectly explained. Jesus. Amos ran a hand through his hair. "How deep does this go?" "Deep enough that running seemed the only option." She met his eyes. "I'm not a brave woman. Sheriff, I couldn't face them, couldn't fight, so I ran, and I'll keep running. As soon as I can arrange—" "No." The word surprised them both. Amos stood, pacing to the window that looked out on Dustwater's dusty Main Street. "You run now. They'll just follow. And next time, there might not be anyone to stand between you and them." He turned back to her. "I've been running too, in my own way. Hiding in a bottle, letting this town rot while I wallowed. Maybe it's time we both stopped running. You don't understand what you're saying. These men—" "I know exactly what I'm saying." There was steel in his voice now, an echo of the commander he'd once been. "I've seen what men will do for power and money. Fought a whole war over it. But I also know that sometimes you've got to make a stand, even if the odds are against you." Clara studied him, this man who was offering to put himself between her and danger. Why? Why risk everything for a stranger? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost wondering. "Because when I look at you, I remember who I used to be. Before the war broke me, before the whiskey took hold. You make me want to be that man again, even if it's just for a while." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Clara felt something crack open inside her chest, a warmth she'd thought died with Samuel. No, that was a lie. What she'd felt for Samuel had been duty, gratitude for his kindness. This was something else entirely. "Amos," she whispered, but he held up a hand. "Don't say it. Whatever you're thinking, don't. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to do right for once." He moved back to his desk. "All business now. I'm going to nose around town, see what Eli's up to. You stay here, keep that door locked. Tom will be by in an hour to spell me." After he left, Clara sat in the empty office, listening to the tick of the clock and the distant sounds of the waking town. She thought about the weight of the papers against her chest, the burden of truth that had cost so much already. And she thought about Amos Creed, who saw in her something worth protecting. Amos made his rounds, projecting a casualness he didn't feel. At the barber shop, the blacksmith's, the feed store, everywhere. The same whispers followed him. The widow, the sheriff's office. What was he thinking? It was at Murphy's saloon that he found what he was looking for. 3 men he didn't recognize, trail-dusty and hard-eyed, talking low over whiskey. One had a scar that ran from ear to jaw. Another kept his hand near his gun even while drinking. Hired guns, sure as sunrise. "Sheriff." The bartender, Irish Mike, nodded toward the strangers. "They came in this morning. Been asking about newcomers to town. Thought you should know." Amos ordered whiskey, just 1 shot, and knocked it back while studying the men in the mirror. They were trying too hard to look casual, and failing. When he left, he felt their eyes follow him. Back at the office, he found Tom entertaining Clara with stories of his younger days. She was actually smiling, the expression transforming her face from tragic beauty to something luminous. The sight hit Amos like a physical blow. "Tom, I need you to ride out to the Hackett Ranch. Tell Will we might need him and his boys in town tomorrow." Tom's face grew serious. "Trouble coming." "Maybe. Best to be prepared." He waited until Tom left before turning to Clara. "There are 3 men in town asking questions. We need to move you." "No." She stood, chin raised. "I'm tired of being shuttled from place to place like freight." "If they've found me, let them come. Clara, I mean it." She moved closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. "I've been afraid for so long, Amos, afraid of them, afraid of being alone, afraid of feeling anything because it hurt too much. But being here, with you." She raised her hand to his cheek, feeling the rasp of stubble. "I'm tired of being afraid." He caught her hand, meaning to push it away, but found himself holding it instead. "You don't know what you're saying. I'm no good for anyone. The drink has me, and even if I beat it, I'm still just a broken-down lawman in a dying town. And I'm a widow carrying secrets that could get us both killed. We make quite a pair." The moment stretched between them, taut as telegraph wire, then moving as if in a dream. Amos lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost questioning, but when she responded, pressing closer, something ignited between them. Years of loneliness and loss poured into that kiss, desperate and healing all at once. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Clara's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I shouldn't have," Amos began, but she pressed her fingers to his lips. "Don't apologize. Not for that. Not for making me feel alive again." A sound from outside made them spring apart. Tom burst through the door, face grim. "Sheriff, we got company. Those 3 from the saloon are headed this way, and Eli Treadwell's with them." Amos checked his Colt, muscle memory taking over. "Clara, get in the back room. Lock the door. I'm staying with you." "The hell you are." He gripped her shoulders. "I can't do what needs doing if I'm worried about you catching a bullet. Please." She wanted to argue. He could see it in her eyes, but she nodded, disappearing into the back room. He heard the lock click into place. "Tom, you armed?" "Always." The deputy checked his own weapon. "What's the play?" "We meet them outside. Don't give them reason to come in." They stepped onto the boardwalk just as Eli and his hired guns arrived. The banker's son was dressed impeccably despite the heat, his smile cold as winter wind. "Sheriff Creed, I hear you've been harboring a fugitive. I've been protecting a citizen of this town from harassment. There a law against that?" "There is when that citizen is wanted for theft and murder back in Missouri." Eli produced a paper with an official-looking seal. "Warrant for one Clara Whitlow, accused of killing her husband and stealing valuable documents from his employer." Amos didn't even glance at the paper. "That warrant's about as real as your concern for justice." "Eli, we both know what this is about." "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." Eli's smile widened. "But the law is the law. Hand her over, and we can all go about our day peacefully." And if I don't? The three hired guns shifted slightly, hands moving toward their weapons. Tom tensed beside him. Then I'll be forced to wire the territorial governor about a sheriff who's abandoned his duties for a pretty face and whatever she's paying him. Eli's voice hardened. You're already a joke. Creed. Don't make yourself a dead one. Through the door, Clara heard every word. Her hand went to the derringer in her pocket, then to the papers in her bodice. So many had died for these already. She couldn't let Amos and Tom join them. She unlocked the door and stepped out before anyone could stop her. I'll come with you, she said quietly. Just leave the sheriff out of this. Clara, no! Amos moved toward her, but one of the gunmen drew, stopping him cold. Smart woman. Eli nodded to his men. Take her. Wait. Clara reached into her bodice, drawing out the packet. This is what you really want, isn't it? Take it and go. Leave me here. Eli's eyes gleamed with triumph. I'll take both, thanks. Can't have witnesses. It happened fast then. Clara threw the packet into the street, papers scattering in the wind. As the gunman instinctively moved to grab them, she pulled her derringer. Amos and Tom drew simultaneously. For a moment, everyone stood frozen, weapons aimed, death hanging in the balance. Then the church bell began to toll, and time seemed to slow. Clara met Amos's eyes across the chaos, saw in them the same desperate hope she felt. Whatever happened next, they'd found each other. In this dying town, among the dust and desperation, they'd found something worth fighting for. The bells continued to toll as the scattered papers danced on the wind, carrying their secrets into the unforgiving desert sky. The standoff lasted heartbeats that felt like hours. Papers swirled around them in the dusty street like confused ghosts, some catching on boots and gun belts, others dancing away on the desert wind. Eli's face had gone purple with rage as he watched his evidence scatter. You stupid woman, he snarled. Kill them all. The gunfire erupted like thunder. Amos shoved Clara behind a water trough as bullets splintered the boardwalk where she'd been standing. Tom dove for cover behind a rain barrel, returning fire with practiced calm. The street erupted in chaos as townspeople scattered, mothers grabbing children, merchants diving behind counters. Clara pressed herself against the rough wood, her little derringer seeming pathetically small now. She heard Amos's Colt boom twice, heard a man scream. Tom was shouting something she couldn't make out over the gunfire. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence was deafening, broken only by the ringing in her ears and someone groaning. She peered around the trough to see one of the gunmen face down in the dirt, unmoving. Another clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. The third had taken cover with Eli behind an overturned wagon. You all right? Amos was beside her, reloading with steady hands. There was blood on his sleeve, but he didn't seem to notice. Yes, you're hurt. Scratch. Tom. Still breathing, came the reply. But we're pinned down good. Eli's voice carried across the street. This doesn't have to end badly. Creed. Send out the woman and walk away. Go to hell, Treadwell. Already been? Eli laughed, high and wild. That's where I learned that money beats righteousness every time. More men were approaching. Clara could hear horses, boots on boardwalks. Her heart sank. Eli had brought more than 3 guns. Sheriff! Will Hackett's voice boomed from somewhere behind them. Heard you might need some help. The relief on Amos's face was brief, but intense. Ranchers began appearing from alleys and doorways, rifles in hand. Not many, maybe a dozen, but enough to even the odds. This ain't your fight, Hackett. Eli called out. Maybe not, Will replied, spitting tobacco juice. But I'm tired of you Treadwells thinking you own this town. The sheriff says the lady stays. She stays. The rumor mill of Dustwater had done its work. Word of Clara's plight had spread through the honest folk who remained, those who remembered when the town had been more than a way station for the corrupt and broken. They came now, drawn by some mixture of justice and curiosity, taking positions along the street. But more of Eli's men were arriving too, hired guns and Treadwell ranch hands. until the main street looked like a battlefield waiting to happen. Clara watched it all with growing horror. This was her fault. People would die because she'd been too weak to face her pursuers alone. "I have to stop this," she whispered. Amos caught her arm. "Don't even think about it. Look around. This is about to become a massacre." She met his eyes, saw her own desperation reflected there. "I won't have this town's blood on my conscience, and I won't have yours on mine." His grip tightened. "We make our stand here." Mayor Patterson appeared then, huffing with exertion and fear, trying to position himself between the two armed camps. "Gentlemen, please, let's discuss this like civilized men." "Stay out of this, Patterson," Eli snapped. "This is law business." "Since when do you speak for the law?" Amos stood, helping Clara to her feet. They moved into the open, and she felt terribly exposed. "That warrant's fake as your father's books." "Prove it." "I will." Judge Artemus Ward stepped out of the hotel, moving with the careful dignity of his 70 years. Clara recognized him. He'd been buying supplies at Murdoch's that morning. "I may be retired, but I can still spot a forged document. That seal's wrong, the language is wrong, and I'd bet my pension the signature's wrong too." "You old fool," Eli snarled. "You have no authority here." Maybe not," Judge Ward replied calmly. "But I've sent word to the federal marshal in Tucson about irregular documents and suspicious deaths linked to arms smuggling. Should be interesting when he arrives." The effect was immediate. Several of Eli's hired guns began backing away, apparently less eager to face federal law than local. Eli himself had gone pale beneath his tan. "You're lying." "Telegraph office is right there," the judge said mildly. "Feel free to check." Clara felt Amos relax slightly beside her, but she knew Eli too well. Cornered men did desperate things. She saw it in his eyes the moment before he moved, saw his hand drop toward his gun. "Amos." She shoved him aside as Eli drew and fired. The bullet meant for the sheriff caught her instead, spinning her around. She heard Amos roar her name, heard more gunfire, but it all seemed very far away. The ground was surprisingly cool against her cheek. She could see the papers still scattered in the street, some of them spotted now with red. Hands turned her over. Amos's hands, gentle despite their trembling. "Clara, God, no, stay with me!" She tried to speak, tasted copper. The pain was less than she'd expected, just a spreading coldness in her side. Amos was pressing something against the wound, his face twisted with anguish. "I'm sorry," she managed. "Should have trusted you sooner." "Don't talk. Doc's coming." He smoothed her hair back, and she saw tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. "You're going to be fine." She wanted to believe him, wanted to stay in this moment, feeling his hands on her face, seeing the naked emotion in his eyes, but darkness was creeping in from the edges, and she was so tired. When she woke, it was to lamplight and the smell of carbolic. Her side blazed with pain, but pain meant life. She turned her head carefully, found Amos slumped in a chair beside the bed, still wearing his blood-stained shirt. Amos! His eyes snapped open, and the relief on his face was almost painful to see. "Thank God. Doc said the bullet missed anything vital, but you lost so much blood." "Eli? Dead." His voice was flat. "Tom shot him when he tried to run. The rest scattered when the judge mentioned federal marshals." He leaned forward, took her hand carefully. "You saved my life. You saved mine first, several times." She squeezed his fingers weakly. "The papers?" "Safe, what we could gather. Anyway, Judge Ward has them." He studied their joined hands. "Clara, what you did, pushing me aside. I couldn't watch you die. Not for me. Not when I just found you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Amos lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Marry me." The proposal surprised them both. Clara's eyes widened, and Amos rushed on before he could lose his nerve. "I know I'm no prize. I'm a drunk trying to get sober, a sheriff in a dying town, and I've got more ghosts than good sense. But I love you. Clara Whitlow, Loved you from the moment you looked at me like I might be worth something. I want to protect you, provide for you, wake up next to you for whatever years God gives us. Amos, if you're going to say no, at least wait until you're healed. Give a man hope for a few days. She tugged weakly at his hand until he leaned closer. I wasn't going to say no. I was going to say you need to change that shirt. You're covered in my blood. He laughed then, a rusty sound but genuine. That's what you focus on? My laundry? Well, if I'm going to marry you, I should start as I mean to go on. She sobered, touched his cheek. Yes, Amos Creed, I'll marry you. Though God knows why either of us deserves happiness after all we've done. Maybe that's the point, he said softly. Maybe broken people need each other most. Over the following days, as Clara healed, Dustwater began to change. The judge's telegraph had indeed brought attention from federal authorities. The Treadwell empire crumbled as investigators followed the trail Clara's documents revealed. Some folks left town, fearing justice or seeking opportunity elsewhere. But others came, drawn by cheap land and the chance to build something clean. Amos limited himself to one drink at sunset, then none at all. It was hard, harder than any battle he'd fought, but Clara's presence made it bearable. When the shakes came, she held him. When the nightmares rode him hard, she woke him gently, reminded him where he was, who he'd become. Tom took to wearing the sheriff's badge when Amos was with Clara, grinning at the responsibility. About time this town had law worth respecting, he'd say. 3 weeks after the shooting, Clara stood carefully, one hand pressed to her side, the wound still pulled. But Doc said she was healing clean. Amos hovered nearby, ready to catch her if she faltered. I'm not made of glass, she chided gently. No, you're made of something stronger. But humor me. She moved to the window, looking out at the town. Already it looked different, cleaner, more alive. Hope had a way of changing a place, like rain in the desert. Any regrets? Amos asked, moving behind her, careful not to jostle her injury. Only one. She leaned back against him carefully. I wish I'd thrown coffee in Eli's face that day at Murdoch's. Would have been satisfying. He chuckled, arms coming around her gently. Bloodthirsty woman. What am I marrying? A survivor, she said simply. Just like you. They stood together in the afternoon light, two damaged souls who'd found salvation in each other's eyes. Outside, Dustwater continued its slow resurrection, proof that even the most God-forsaken places could bloom again with the right tending. The wedding was set for spring, when the desert flowers would paint the harsh landscape with color. By then, Clara's documents would have helped convict over a dozen men across 3 territories. By then, Amos would have gone 6 months without whiskey. By then, they would have learned each other's rhythms, the way he hummed when he shaved, the way she bit her lip when concentrating. But for now, they simply stood together, watching the sun paint the sky crimson and gold, grateful for second chances and the courage to take them. Winter came to Dustwater with unusual ferocity that year, bringing snow that turned the desert into an alien landscape of white. Clara stood at the window of the house she now shared with Amos, watching the flakes fall like ash from some distant fire. Her side still ached when the weather changed, a reminder of choices made and prices paid. You'll catch cold standing there, Amos said, entering with an armload of firewood. He'd kept his promise about the drink, 4 months sober now, and it showed in the steadiness of his hands, the clarity of his eyes. I was thinking about Samuel, she admitted, not turning from the window. He would have been 32 today. Amos set the wood by the hearth, then came to stand behind her. He'd learned when to speak and when to simply be present, and now he waited. I didn't love him, Clara continued softly. Not the way a wife should love a husband. He was kind to me when I had nothing, gave me his name when I needed respectability. But love? She shook her head. I think he knew. I think that's why he took such risks with those documents, trying to be a hero for a wife who couldn't give him her heart. You gave him what you could, Amos said gently. That's all anyone can do. She turned then, studying his weathered face. I never told you how we met. Samuel, I mean, you don't have to. I want to. She moved to the settee near the fire, and he joined her. I was 17, working in a boarding house in Independence. The owner had certain expectations of the girls who worked there. When I refused, he threw me out. No references, no pay owed. I was sitting on the church steps, trying not to cry, when Samuel found me. She smiled at the memory, though it was tinged with sadness. He was so proper, so concerned, offered me a position as clerk in his office, said his handwriting was terrible and he needed help. It wasn't true, of course. His penmanship was perfect. But he gave me work, then courting, then marriage, safety. He sounds like a good man. He was, which makes what I feel for you seem like a betrayal sometimes. She took his hand, traced the calluses there. With him, I felt grateful. With you, I feel alive. Like I've been sleeping for years and finally woke up. Is that wrong? Amos pulled her close, mindful of her healing wound. If it's wrong, then we're both damned, because you woke me up too. Clara made me remember why staying sober was worth the fight. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire dance. Outside, Tom Morrison made his rounds, the new sheriff's badge catching the lamplight. Amos had insisted on stepping down once the town council reformed, said Dustwater needed law that wasn't tainted by years of whiskey and neglect, but everyone still called him sheriff out of habit and respect. A knock interrupted their quiet. Clara tensed, even now. Unexpected visitors made her nervous, but Amos recognized the knock, went to answer with a slight smile. Judge Ward stood on the porch, snow dusting his shoulders. Evening, folks. Sorry to disturb, but I thought you should see this right away. He handed Amos a telegram, watching as the younger man's face went through several expressions: surprise, concern, determination. What is it? Clara asked. Federal prosecutor in Denver says the trials are starting next month. They want you to testify. The words hit her like cold water. She'd known this was coming, but somehow had let herself pretend it was over, that the scattered papers and Eli's death had ended it. I can't, she whispered. Those men, they're lawyers. They'll tear me apart, make me out to be a hysterical woman, a murderer who killed her own husband. They can try, Judge Ward said calmly, but the evidence is clear, and you'll have support. I'll be there, testifying about the forged warrant. The federal marshals have gathered considerable corroborating evidence. Your testimony is the key that locks it all together. Denver's a long way, Amos said carefully, and Clara's still healing. The prosecutor said they could wait until spring if needed. But Clara, the judge's voice gentled, these men killed your husband. They've killed others. Without your testimony, some of them might go free. Clara stood abruptly, paced to the window. Snow was falling harder now, obscuring the world beyond the glass. She thought of Samuel, of his earnest face as he'd shown her the evidence he'd gathered. We have to do what's right, Clara, he'd said, even when it's dangerous. I'll need time to think, she said finally. After the judge left, Clara found herself restless. Amos watched her pace. Knowing better than to push, finally, she stopped, faced him. If I go, will you come with me? Try to stop me. It could take weeks. The town has Tom, and Will Hackett's been itching to play deputy. He crossed to her, took her hands. Clara, you don't face this alone. Not anymore. That night, she came to him. They'd been sharing a house but not a bed, both cautious about her injury and the proprieties of their engagement. But now, with the future uncertain again, Clara needed the comfort of his presence. Just hold me, she whispered, sliding under the quilts beside him. I need to feel safe. Amos gathered her carefully against him, her back to his chest, his arm protective around her waist. She fit against him perfectly, like she'd been made for this space. He pressed his lips to her hair, breathed in the scent of lavender soap and something uniquely Clara. I'm scared, she admitted in the darkness. Not of dying, of facing them, of having to relive it all in front of strangers who'll judge every word. Fear's just another enemy to face down, he murmured. And you're the bravest woman I know. You saved my life twice, once from a bullet, once from the bottle. She turned in his arms, careful of her side, until she could see his face in the moonlight filtering through the curtains. Make me forget, she whispered. Just for tonight. Make me forget everything but us. He kissed her then, gentle but thorough, pouring into it all the love and desire he'd been holding back. She responded with equal fervor, hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, became something more primal, more necessary. Your injury, he started to pull back, but she held him fast. Is healed enough. I need you. Amos, I need to feel alive. What followed was a communion of souls as much as bodies. He worshipped her with infinite care, mapping every curve and hollow, learning what made her gasp and sigh. She gave herself completely, holding nothing back, finding in his arms a peace she'd never known existed. Later, as they lay entwined, hearts still racing, Clara traced patterns on his chest. No regrets, she asked, echoing his question from weeks before. Only that we waited so long. He tilted her chin up, kissed her softly. Marry me now, tonight. Wake the preacher. Make it official before we leave for Denver. That's scandalous. Sheriff Creed, what will the town say? Former sheriff, he corrected. And I don't give a damn what they say. I want you to face those bastards as my wife, with my name and protection. I want the whole world to know you're not alone. Clara considered, then smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. All right, but I want flowers, even if we have to steal them from Mrs. Thornberry's greenhouse. Deal. They dressed quickly, giddy as children planning mischief. The snow had stopped, leaving the world pristine and new. They woke Reverend Morse, who grumbled about young folks and propriety, but agreed when he saw their determination. Tom and his new bride served as witnesses, yawning but pleased. And so, in the parsonage parlor with snow-stolen roses in her hair and Amos's mother's ring on her finger, Clara Whitlow became Clara Creed. The ceremony was simple, the words basic, but the promises they made with their eyes held more weight than any vows. Walking back through the snowy streets as husband and wife, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years, hope unmarred by fear. Whatever came in Denver, she wouldn't face it alone. No wedding night in a proper hotel. Amos apologized as they reached their house. No honeymoon in San Francisco like you deserve. I have you, she said simply. That's more than I ever dreamed of deserving. Inside, they built up the fire and made love again. Slower this time, savoring each touch and whisper. Outside, the snow began falling once more, blanketing dust water and temporary innocence. But inside their small house, two wounded souls found healing in each other's arms, preparing to face the world together. When morning came, it would bring preparations for the journey to Denver, fears to confront and justice to seek. But for now, in the warmth of their bed with a taste of forever on their lips, Amos and Clara Creed had everything they needed. I love you, she whispered against his throat, the words she'd never said to Samuel, never thought she'd say to anyone. And I love you, he replied, holding her close, till the last star falls from the sky. They slept then, wrapped in each other in the certainty that whatever trials awaited, they would face them as one. The house settled around them, keeping watch, while dust water slumbered under its blanket of snow, dreaming of spring and the changes it would bring. The journey to Denver took 8 days through weather that couldn't decide between winter's last gasp and spring's first breath. Clara rode beside Amos in a hired wagon, her husband's presence a steady comfort against the anxiety that grew with each mile. Behind them rode Tom Morrison and Will Hackett, who'd insisted on coming along as protection. You don't need to do this. Clara had protested when they'd volunteered. Sheriff Creed saved my boy from drowning 2 summers back. Will had said simply, man doesn't forget that kind of debt. Now, as Denver's buildings appeared on the horizon, Clara felt her courage falter. The city seemed impossibly large after Dustwater's simple streets, full of strangers who would judge her, question her, perhaps condemn her. "Steady?" Amos murmured, taking her hand. "Remember, you're not the one on trial." But it felt like she was the federal prosecutor. A thin man named Harrison Blackwood had arranged rooms for them at a respectable boarding house. He met them there, his manner professional but not unkind. "Mrs. Creed," he said, acknowledging her married name with a nod. "I know this is difficult, but your testimony is crucial. These men have corrupted half the territory with their schemes. Your husband, your late husband, his evidence started us down this path. You can finish it." "When?" Clara asked, proud when her voice didn't shake. "Day after tomorrow. I'll need to prepare you tomorrow. Go over your testimony." He paused, studying her pale face. "They'll have good lawyers, Mrs. Creed. They'll try to discredit you, make you seem hysterical or vengeful. You must remain calm, no matter what they say." That night, Clara barely slept. She lay in Amos's arms, feeling his steady heartbeat, trying to draw strength from it. When dawn came gray and reluctant, she was already dressed, standing at the window watching the city wake. The preparation with Blackwood was grueling. He asked her to recount everything: Samuel's discovery, his murder, her flight, the confrontation in Dustwater. By the end, her voice was hoarse and her hands trembled. "They'll ask about your relationship with Sheriff Creed," Blackwood warned. "The timeline of your marriage so soon after your widowhood. They'll try to paint you as a woman of loose morals, someone who can't be trusted. Let 'em." Amos growled from his chair in the corner. He'd insisted on being present, a solid, protective presence. "Former sheriff," Clara corrected with a weak smile. "He keeps forgetting." The morning of the trial dawned clear and cold. Clara dressed carefully in her most respectable dress, black still, but with touches of gray that marked her as a woman in half-mourning rather than deep grief. Amos wore his best suit, looking uncomfortable but determined. The courthouse was an imposing building of red stone, its steps crowded with reporters and gawkers. Clara kept her head high as they climbed, ignoring the whispers and stares. Inside, the courtroom was packed. She recognized some faces from the documents, powerful men who'd grown rich on blood and corruption, now facing justice. State calls Mrs. Clara Creed to the stand. The walk to the witness chair felt endless. Clara placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. From her elevated position, she could see everything: the jury of stern-faced men, the defendants with their expensive lawyers, Amos in the gallery with eyes never leaving her face. Blackwood's questions came first, allowing her to tell her story simply and directly. She spoke of Samuel's discovery, his determination to expose the truth, the night he was murdered. Her voice caught only once, when describing finding his body, but she pushed through. Then came the defense. Mrs. Creed, the lead attorney, a man named Josiah Sterling with silver hair and cold eyes, approached like a circling wolf. "You married your current husband quite quickly after your first husband's death, didn't you?" 4 months later, yes. 4 months. Some would say that's unseemly haste for a grieving widow. His smile was sharp. "Unless, of course, you weren't truly grieving?" "Objection," Blackwood called, but Sterling waved it away. "I'll rephrase. How long had you known Mr. Creed before your first husband's death?" "We met after I arrived in Dustwater, after Samuel died." "I see. And this man, this sheriff with a reputation for drunkenness, immediately took an interest in you. He protected me from harassment. He was kind." "Kind." Sterling made the word sound dirty. "And you responded to this kindness by moving into his office, spending nights alone with him." "I was in danger. My house had been ransacked." "By persons unknown. Yes, how convenient." Sterling paced before her. "Tell me, Mrs. Creed, did you love your first husband?" The question hit like a physical blow. Clara looked to Amos, saw him leaning forward, fists clenched. She took a breath, decided on honesty. Samuel was a good man who gave me a home when I had nothing. I respected him, cared for him, but the deep love a wife should feel? She lifted her chin. No, I've only felt that once, with my current husband. Samuel knew this. I believe. It's why he tried so hard to be worthy of love I couldn't give. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Sterling's eyes glittered with triumph. So you admit you didn't love him? Perhaps you wanted him gone. Perhaps these supposed documents were just a convenient excuse. How dare you? Clara's voice cut through his accusations like a blade. Samuel died trying to do what was right. He died because your clients, she pointed at the defendants, valued their profits over human lives. I may not have loved him as he deserved, but I will not let you dishonor his memory with your implications. Mrs. Creed, control yourself. No. She stood in the witness box, trembling with rage rather than fear now. You want to paint me as some scheming woman? Fine, but nothing changes the truth in those documents. Nothing changes the fact that Samuel Whitlow died because he tried to stop murder and corruption. Nothing changes what your clients did. Your Honor, Sterling appealed. But the judge was watching Clara with something like approval. The witness will be seated, he said mildly. Mr. Sterling, do you have any questions actually relevant to the evidence at hand? The rest of the cross-examination was brutal, but Clara held firm. She answered each question clearly, refused to be shaken. When Sterling finally dismissed her, she walked back to the gallery on unsteady legs, collapsing into Amos's waiting arms. You did it, he whispered. You were magnificent. The trial continued for 3 more days. Other witnesses testified, Judge Ward about the forged warrant, federal investigators about their findings, even Tom Morrison about the confrontation in Dustwater. The evidence was overwhelming, and Samuel's documents, authenticated by experts, were damning. On the final day, as they waited for the verdict, Clara walked with Amos in a small park near the courthouse. The first spring flowers were pushing through the last snow, determined and bright. Whatever happens, she said, I'm glad I did this. Samuel deserved justice, and you deserve peace. Amos replied, Think we'll find it? I think we already have. The rest is just finishing old business. The verdict came that afternoon. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Reporters rushing for the doors, defendants shouting, lawyers demanding appeals. But Clara sat quietly, feeling something lift from her shoulders. It was done. That night, in their boarding house room, she finally allowed herself to cry, not from sadness, but from relief. Amos held her, rocking gently, understanding without words. Can we go home now? She asked when the tears stopped. First thing tomorrow. Tom's probably let the whole town fall apart without us. She laughed, watery but genuine. I want to see the desert again. Want to wake up in our own bed, make breakfast in our own kitchen. Is that silly? If it is, I'm silly too. He kissed her forehead. Though there's one stop I want to make on the way back. Oh, that hotel in Santa Fe I mentioned, the one with the big bathtub and room service? Figured we deserve a proper honeymoon, even if it's just 2 nights. Clara smiled, the expression transforming her tired face. Mr. Creed, are you attempting to seduce your wife? Every day for the rest of our lives, if you'll let me. They left Denver the next morning, the city falling away behind them like a discarded coat. Will and Tom rode ahead, giving them privacy, singing bawdy songs that made Clara blush and laugh. The trial was over. The past lay to rest. Now there was only the road home and the future stretching before them. In Santa Fe, they spent 2 days in their room, ordering meals sent up, luxuriating in each other and the novelty of true privacy. Clara discovered she had a wanton side that surprised and delighted them both. Amos proved that his hands, so deadly with a gun, could be infinitely gentle when mapping the territory of his wife's pleasure. I never knew, Clara gasped one afternoon, wrapped in sheets in Amos's arms. Never knew it could be like this, that I could feel so much. Neither did I. He admitted, You make me feel like a new man. Clara, like the war and the whiskey were just bad dreams. "We saved each other," she said simply. "That's what love does." The rest of the journey passed in contentment. As they crested the final rise and saw dust water spread below them, Clara felt her heart lift. The town looked different somehow, cleaner, more hopeful. Or maybe she was the one who'd changed. "Welcome home, Mrs. Creed," Amos said, and the word home had never sounded sweeter. They drove down Main Street to find bunting hanging from the buildings, and townsfolk gathered to greet them. Tom had telegraphed ahead with news of the verdict, and Dustwater was ready to celebrate their small part in bringing justice to the territory. That night, after the impromptu party had died down and they were alone in their house, Clara stood at the bedroom window. The stars were brilliant in the clear desert sky, and somewhere a coyote sang to the moon. "No regrets?" Amos asked, coming up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "None. For the first time in my life. Absolutely none." They stood together in the darkness, two souls who'd found light in each other, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. The past was settled, the future uncertain. But the present, this moment, this love, this life they'd built from the ashes of their former selves, was perfect. And that, Clara thought as she turned in her husband's arms for a kiss that promised forever, was more than enough. Spring arrived in Dustwater with a violence of color. The desert, so long brown and gray, exploded with wildflowers that carpeted the hills in purple, yellow, and fierce orange. Clara knelt in her garden, coaxing life from the stubborn soil, when she heard the horses approaching. 3 riders, moving fast. Her hand went instinctively to the pistol Amos had insisted she carry, even here at home. Old habits died hard, and though the trial was months past, sometimes she still woke gasping from nightmares of pursuit. But as the riders drew closer, she recognized Tom Morrison's familiar silhouette. The other 2 were strangers, a man and woman, travel-worn and tense. Tom swung down from his horse before it fully stopped. "Clara, where's Amos?" "In town, meeting with the council about the new school." She stood, brushing dirt from her skirts. "What's wrong?" "These folks need help, the kind that might bring trouble." The woman dismounted then, and Clara saw she was young, perhaps 20, with dark hair and frightened eyes. Blood stained her riding skirt, though she moved without apparent injury. "Please," the woman said. "They said in town that you and your husband help people, that you understand about running from powerful men." Clara's chest tightened. "Tom, fetch Amos, quickly." As he rode off, she turned to the strangers. "Come inside. You look like you need food and rest." The woman was Ruth Sinclair, the man her brother Marcus. Over coffee and Clara's fresh bread, their story spilled out. Ruth had been engaged to the son of a cattle baron named Josiah Kerr, a man who controlled vast swaths of land across 3 territories. "I thought Calvin was different from his father," Ruth said, hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "He was charming, educated. But after we were engaged, he changed, became possessive, violent. When I tried to break the engagement," she touched her arm, where Clara now suspected bruises hid beneath the sleeves. She left. Marcus took up the tale. "But Kerr's sending men after us. Says she signed a contract, that she belongs to his family now. The blood on her skirt. We had to fight our way past 2 of them yesterday." Clara felt the familiar chill of recognition. Different names, different details, but the same story. Powerful men who thought they owned the world and everyone in it. "Why come here?" she asked. "Heard about the trial in Denver, how you stood up to men like that and won." Ruth's eyes held desperate hope. "We thought maybe you'd know what to do." The door opened and Amos entered, his face grave. He'd already gotten the basics from Tom. He studied the Sinclairs with the measuring gaze Clara remembered from their first meeting. "How many men does Kerr have?" "Dozens," Marcus replied. "Maybe more. He owns half the law between here and California. And you came here." It wasn't quite a question. Amos moved to the window, scanning the horizon. "Tom, how long since they arrived?" 20 minutes, maybe. Then we have maybe 2 hours before Kerr's men figure out where they went. He turned to Clara. Pack supplies for a week. We'll need to move them. No. Ruth stood, chin raised despite her fear. I'm tired of running, tired of looking over my shoulder. If they come, I'll face them. With what? Marcus demanded. We barely escaped last time, and there were only 2. If Kerr sends more, then we'll be ready. Amos's voice carried quiet authority. But not here. Clara, remember that abandoned mine shaft up in the hills? The one near Shepherd's Canyon? She nodded, understanding immediately. Defensible position. Water nearby. Multiple escape routes if needed. Can you ride? She asked Ruth. Yes. Then we leave in 10 minutes. Clara was already moving, gathering supplies with practiced efficiency. This wasn't her first flight into hiding, but now she wasn't alone. Now she had Amos and Tom, and a town that had learned to stand together. They made a strange procession heading into the hills as the sun peaked. Tom had quietly gathered a few more men. Will Hackett and his sons. Doc Holliday, no relation to the famous one, he always insisted. And Judge Ward's nephew, a young lawyer named Stephen who was handy with a rifle. The mine shaft was really a series of caves, carved by long-dead prospectors chasing silver dreams. Clara helped Ruth settle into the most sheltered spot while the men set up defensive positions. You don't have to do this, Ruth said quietly. I've brought danger to your door. Danger found my door long before you. Clara replied, The difference is, I'm not facing it alone anymore. She checked her pistol, a wedding gift from Amos. Neither are you. They didn't have long to wait. As the sun began its descent, painting the rocks in shades of blood and gold, the dust cloud appeared. Riders, moving fast and purposeful. Clara counted at least a dozen. Here they come, Will called. Looks like they brought a party. Amos positioned himself at the cave mouth, rifle ready. Nobody fires unless they do. Maybe we can talk our way out of this. But Clara, watching his face, knew he didn't believe it. Men like Kerr didn't send a dozen riders to talk. The riders stopped just outside rifle range. Their leader, a man with a face like weathered leather and eyes like chips of ice, rode forward alone. Name's Dutch McCready, he called. I'm looking for stolen property belonging to Mr. Josiah Kerr. Send out the girl, and we'll leave peaceful like. No property here, Amos replied. Just free citizens of the territory. Now, that's where you're wrong. Friend, Miss Sinclair signed a marriage contract, legal and binding. She belongs to the Kerr family now. Like hell I do. Ruth appeared beside Amos, rifle in hand. Tell Calvin if he wants me. He can come himself instead of sending hired killers. Dutch's smile was cold, spirited. Calvin likes that. Makes breaking them more fun. His hand moved toward his gun. Last chance. Send her out, or... The shot came from their left flank. One of Kerr's men had tried to circle around, fired at Tom's position. Then everything erupted. Clara pulled Ruth back as bullets whined off rock. Amos and the others returned fire, the canyon echoing with thunder. She saw Marcus firing steadily, protecting his sister, saw Will Hackett roar as a bullet creased his shoulder. The right side, Stephen shouted. They're trying to flank us. Clara moved without thinking, taking position at a gap in the rocks. She saw 3 riders approaching, fired carefully. One man cursed, clutching his arm. They pulled back, but she knew they'd try again. The battle raged as shadows lengthened. Kerr's men had numbers, but the defenders had position and desperation. Clara lost count of her shots, focused only on protecting their refuge. Beside her, Ruth proved surprisingly capable, handling her rifle with deadly calm. Then, sudden as it started, the firing stopped. In the ringing silence, Dutch's voice carried clear. This ain't over. Mister, Kerr doesn't forget insults. You've made an enemy today. Tell Kerr he made an enemy the day he laid hands on an innocent woman, Amos shouted back. And tell him Amos Creed doesn't forget either. They watched the riders retreat, leaving 2 of their number unmoving in the dirt. Clara felt no satisfaction, only weariness. This was indeed not over. Anyone hurt? Amos called. Will took a graze, Doc reported. Nothing serious. Boy's got a thick hide. I've had worse for my own cattle, Will grumbled, but he let Doc work. As darkness fell, they made camp in the caves. Clara tended the wounded, noting with some pride that her hands were steady. How far she'd come from the terrified widow who'd arrived in Dustwater. They'll be back, Marcus said grimly. Kerr won't let this stand. No, he won't. Amos agreed. Which is why we're going to take the fight to him. Everyone turned to stare. Amos sat cleaning his rifle, casual as if he'd suggested a picnic. You're crazy, Tom said. Ride into Kerr's territory? That's suicide. No, that's tactics. He expects us to fort up, wait for him to bring overwhelming force. He looked at Ruth. You said Calvin was different from his father. How? He has political ambitions, wants to be governor someday. His father's methods embarrass him, even as he benefits from them. And a scandal would ruin those ambitions. Clara understood immediately. If word got out about what he did to Ruth, about sending killers after her. Exactly. Amos smiled, the expression sharp. We don't need to outgun Kerr. We just need to make keeping Ruth more costly than letting her go. They spent hours planning. Stephen, the young lawyer, proved invaluable, knowing exactly what evidence would be needed, which newspapers would be most interested in the story. By dawn, they had a strategy that might keep them all alive. I'll need to go to the territorial capital, Stephen said. File papers. Talk to judges who aren't in Kerr's pocket. I'll go with you. Judge Ward decided, my name still carries some weight, and I'll pay a visit to Calvin himself. Amos said, man to man, not alone. Clara said immediately, we go together or not at all. He started to protest, saw the steel in her eyes, and nodded. Together, then. Ruth watched them with something like wonder. You'd risk all this for strangers? You're not strangers, Clara said firmly. You're people in need. That makes you neighbors in my book. They broke camp as the sun rose, splitting into groups. The confrontation with Dutch had bought them time. Kerr's men would need to regroup, report back, but that time was limited. As Clara rode beside Amos toward whatever awaited them, she thought about the strange turns life took. A year ago, she'd been running, terrified, alone. Now she rode toward danger with her head high, surrounded by people willing to fight for justice. Scared? Amos asked quietly. Yes, she admitted. But not alone. That makes all the difference. He reached over, squeezed her hand. Whatever happens, I'm proud to ride with you, Clara Creed. And I with you, she replied. They rode on through the morning light. Two people who'd found courage in each other, ready to face whatever came next, behind them. Dustwater slept peacefully, unaware that its sheriff and his wife were once again standing between innocence and those who would destroy it. The game was far from over, but Clara had learned something in her time in this harsh land. Sometimes, the only way to stop running was to turn and fight, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, you didn't have to fight alone. The Kerr Ranch sprawled across the landscape like a small kingdom, white-painted buildings stark against the red earth. Clara felt her throat tighten as they approached the main gate, where armed men watched their arrival with suspicion. Beside her, Amos rode easy in the saddle, but she knew him well enough now to see the tension in his shoulders. State your business, the lead guard called out. Amos Creed to see Calvin Kerr. Tell him it concerns his fiancée. The guard's eyes narrowed, but he sent a rider to the house. They waited in the harsh sun, Clara's hand never far from her pistol. Finally, the gates opened. Calvin Kerr received them in his father's study, a room that spoke of power and old money. He was younger than Clara expected, perhaps 30, with the kind of handsomeness that masked cruelty. His smile was practiced, political. Sheriff Creed, or former sheriff, I hear, and the famous Mrs. Creed. His eyes lingered on Clara in a way that made her skin crawl. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? We need to discuss Ruth Sinclair, Amos said bluntly. Calvin's smile faltered for just a moment. My fiancée. Has something happened to her? She's safe, Clara said. No thanks to the men your father sent after her. I don't know what you mean. But Calvan's knuckles were white where he gripped his whiskey glass. Ruth left without explanation. Naturally, father was concerned enough to send Dutch McCready and a dozen gunmen. Amos leaned forward. 2 of them won't be reporting back. Silence stretched taut. Then Calvin laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You killed Kerr men? Do you have any idea what my father will do? I have a better idea what the newspapers will do when they hear about it, Clara said quietly. A young woman fleeing forced marriage, pursued by hired killers. A powerful family using violence to enforce a contract that any decent judge would throw out. How do you think that will play in your gubernatorial campaign? Calvan went very still. You're threatening me? We're offering you a choice, Amos corrected. Let Ruth go, publicly and permanently. In return, this stays quiet. She gets her freedom. You keep your political future. My father will never agree to this. Then perhaps it's time you stopped being your father's son and became your own man. Clara said, Ruth told us you were different once, that you had dreams beyond cattle and land. Were those dreams real or just another lie? Calvin stood abruptly, pacing to the window, in profile. Clara could see something almost human in his expression. Regret, perhaps, or shame. I did care for her, he said quietly. Before father got involved. Before he started talking about bloodlines and dynasty and using her family's connections. He turned back to them. But father doesn't accept defiance. From anyone. Then don't defy him. Amos suggested, convince him. Tell him a scandal would hurt the family name. That there are other women. Ones who come willingly. Whatever it takes. And if I can't, Clara stood, moved to face him directly. Then ask yourself what kind of governor you'd make if you can't even govern your own choices. What kind of man builds a future on a woman's unwilling tears? Calvin studied her for a long moment. You were the one from the Denver trial. The widow who brought down half the territory's corruption ring. Yes, they say you were fearless on the stand, that you faced down lawyers and threats without flinching. I was terrified every moment. Clara admitted, but I did it anyway, because it was right. Right. Calvin spoke the word like he was tasting something foreign. Father says might makes right. That power is its own justification. Your father is wrong. Amos said simply, I've seen what that thinking leads to. Graveyards full of it. Another silence. Then Calvin moved to his desk, pulled out paper and pen. I'll need a day to convince father, and I'll want a signed statement from Ruth that she releases any claim to breach of promise. Clean break. Both sides. Done. Amos agreed. As Calvin wrote, Clara watched his face. There was intelligence there, and ambition, but also something else. A hunger for something more than his father's brutal legacy. Perhaps Ruth had seen truly after all, glimpsed the man he could have been. There's a hotel in town, Calvin said, handing over a letter of introduction. Stay there tonight. I'll send word by morning. They were at the door when he called after them. Mrs. Creed, what you said about facing terror anyway. Does it get easier? Clara turned back. No, but it gets more necessary. They rode away from the ranch in silence, both aware they'd placed their lives in the hands of a man torn between 2 worlds. The hotel Calvin had mentioned proved respectable, and they took a room overlooking the main street. Think he'll keep his word? Clara asked as she unpinned her hair. Maybe. He wants something his father's methods can't buy, respectability, legitimacy. We offered him a path to it. Or we've given him time to gather more men. Amos pulled her close. Then we've got one night before all hell breaks loose. Better make it count. She kissed him, pouring all her fear and love into it. They made love with desperate tenderness, each touch a promise, each whisper a vow. Afterward, they lay entwined, watching shadows lengthen across the ceiling. If something happens tomorrow, Clara began. Nothing's happening except us riding home to tell Ruth she's free. Amos interrupted. I've got plans for us. Mrs. Creed. That garden of yours needs expanding. and I promised to build you a proper chicken coop. Can't do that if we're dead." She laughed, despite everything. "A chicken coop? That's your grand romantic gesture? Woman, have you seen the price of eggs? Romance is nice, but practical matters." They talked through the night, about everything and nothing, the life they were building, the changes in Dustwater, the possibility of children someday. When dawn came, they were dressed and ready, weapons loaded, hearts steadied. The messenger arrived as they were finishing breakfast. A single line in Calvin's hand. "It's done. She's free." They met Calvin at the town limits, where he handed over a formal document releasing Ruth from all obligations. His father's signature was there, bold and angry. "How?" Amos asked. Calvin's smile was rueful. "I told him about Mrs. Creed's involvement, about the Denver trial and the men now serving prison terms. Father's many things, but he's not stupid. He knows when to cut losses." "And you?" Clara asked. "What will you do now?" "Try to be better than my raising. I suppose, maybe even succeed." He touched his hat. "Tell Ruth. Tell her I'm sorry, for all of it." They parted without handshakes or farewells, but Clara thought she saw something like respect in Calvin's eyes. The ride back to Dustwater was swift, urgent with the need to share good news. They found the town in an uproar. During their absence, Judge Ward and Stephen had returned from the capital with their own victory. A territorial judge had issued a ruling that marriage contracts signed under duress were invalid. Citing Ruth's case specifically, the precedent would protect other women in similar situations. Ruth wept when they told her she was free, really and legally free. She embraced Clara so tightly it hurt her still tender ribs. "I don't know how to thank you," Ruth sobbed. "All of you. Live well," Clara said simply. "Be happy. That's thanks enough." The celebration that night filled the saloon and spilled into the streets. Tom played his fiddle while couples danced, and even Judge Ward was seen attempting a reel with the widow Henderson. Clara watched from Amos's arms, marveling at how much had changed. "A year ago, this town was dying," she murmured. "Now look at it. Town's not the only thing that got resurrected," Amos replied, spinning her in a turn. "You brought us all back to life. Clara, me most of all." As the evening wound down, Ruth approached them one last time. She and Marcus would leave in the morning, head west to California and a fresh start. "All right," Ruth promised. "Let you know how we fare." "Do," Clara said warmly. "And if you ever need anything, I know where to find help." Ruth smiled through tears. From people who understand that standing up for what's right matters more than standing alone. Later, as Clara and Amos walked home through streets still echoing with music, she thought about the strange paths that had brought them all here. Pain and loss had driven her to Dustwater, but love and purpose had made her stay. "No regrets?" Amos asked. Their old question. "None," she said firmly. "For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I belong." They paused at their gate, looking back at the town they'd helped save. Lights glowed in windows, families safe behind them. Somewhere a baby cried and was soothed. Life, ordinary and precious, going on. "Come on, Mrs. Creed," Amos said, drawing her inside. "Tomorrow's coming, and I've got a chicken coop to build." Clara laughed, following her husband into their home. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, keeping their ancient watch over Dustwater and all the souls who'd found redemption in its dusty streets. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer fearsome. They had each other. They had their town. They had proven that even in the harshest places, love and justice could bloom like desert flowers after rain. It was more than enough. It was everything. In the morning, there would be new challenges, new people seeking help, new battles to fight. But tonight, in the quiet of their home with the taste of victory sweet on their lips, Amos and Clara Creed held each other close and knew that sometimes, against all odds, the good guys actually won. Thank you for joining us here at Wild West Campfire for this tale of love and redemption in old Dustwater. If you enjoyed Clara and Amos's story, We'd love to hear where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles, just like the old telegraph lines that once linked frontier towns. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of courage, romance, and adventure from the American frontier. What did you think of Clara's journey? Share your thoughts below. We read every comment and love hearing how these stories of the Old West touch hearts in the modern world.